Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode, Kory and I recap Game 3 of the NBA Finals. As always, you can catch The Outlet on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. Well, Kory. Game 3 went to Miami, 115-104. Looks like we have a series. Big shout out to Jimmy Butler, who was just dynamic tonight. You know, probably one of the best games of his entire career. 40 points, 14 of 20 from the field, 10 rebounds, 13 assists. He just carried the load and throw in 2 steals and 2 blocks. How you feeling after this Game 3 win for Miami?
So right before we hopped on, I got to hear his post game with Rachel Nichols. And she said, "What was your mindset for the best game of your career?" And what did he say? Win. That was it. And that's what we saw from Jimmy Butler tonight. You know, last game he had 25 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists or 12 assists. Yeah. And it was a really good game. And, you know, it felt like though you needed more from him. Well, you got more. You got everything you could have wanted from Jimmy Butler tonight. His first 40-point game since last round against the Milwaukee Bucks, or round before, excuse me. And, you know, he was tremendous. And, you know, did it do it from the three-point line, did it by going to the hole, by creating his own offense. He was fantastic.
And this is kind of like the Jimmy Butler we wanted to see at different points of the playoffs. Like, be super aggressive. If the Heat are going to lose or win, it's because of you. And, like, I didn't know if he had this type of game in him, to be honest. Like, at this point, how much work he's had to put in this postseason, the defense the Lakers had. But, you know, he was doing his thing. He hit a lot of tough shots. There was one play where LeBron was, like, fully locked in and engaged, and Butler still scored on him in the paint. And you could tell LeBron was pissed afterwards, and Jimmy Butler just was smirking up the sideline after he scored. So it's just, like, that type of vibe. And for Miami, they go as Butler kind of goes. Like, he's their leader. They have that vibe. And from the start, they just had different energy from what we saw in Game 2. Game 1, they started really well, but they weren't able to bounce back after that Lakers run. Game 2, they didn't have energy. Tonight, they kept that energy throughout.
They had the energy, and, you know, the Lakers gave them a ton of confidence early because they had, 5 turnovers in the first 4 minutes of this game. You know, just very sloppy with the basketball. And that just led to Miami, you know, pumping themselves up. They scored. They were scoring off the turnovers. They were rebounding well. And then Anthony Davis got into foul trouble early. And you could just tell Miami got some confidence. Jimmy Butler was like, all right, now we have to attack at this moment type of ordeal. Yeah. And they really executed so well without Bam and Goran.
I want to say the Lakers almost had 10 first quarter turnovers. Like, it was that many.
I think they had 9. I want to say they had 9.
Yeah, so it was that high. It was at one point they had more turnovers than field goal attempts in the first quarter, which is bad. And we talk about this for Miami. Not necessarily a great offensive team, but you let them get going in transition. They get some rhythm. They make some shots. Then all of a sudden when they have to make those contested looks later in the game, they're good to go. And let's talk about that defense they put on Anthony Davis. You know, I thought there was some switch-ups tonight. I think Andre Iguodala spent more time on him tonight than he did previously in the other 2 games. It's obviously hard to tell with all the garbage time, but also they just made an effort to make him uncomfortable from the start. In the first half of this game, he really did nothing. It felt like most of his points and most of his impact really came in that third quarter, because even in the fourth, I didn't necessarily feel Anthony Davis.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't score in the first quarter. He didn't have his stat line after the first quarter was 7 minutes, no points, no rebounds, no assists, but 4 turnovers.
And I think 3 fouls.
And 2 or 3 fouls. Like you said, they threw bunch of different looks at him. He never got in the rhythm. Definitely got it going late in the third quarter or the middle of the third quarter. And then it just felt like in the fourth quarter, maybe he was worried about fouling out and getting into foul trouble, because it was a different Anthony Davis. And we've kind of mentioned this throughout these recaps. Anthony Davis is kind of a hot and cold player from quarter to quarter. Ends up generally having really good games, but he definitely disappears at times in which he's just not as aggressive, or, you know, obviously the foul trouble was a big part of that, though.
It feels like you can take Davis out of rhythm. You can take him out of the game in different parts where it's so hard to take out a guy like LeBron James. We'll talk about in a little bit, but it felt like Davis might have turned a corner after Game 1 and Game 2, just having such an impact throughout. Because like you were saying, you know, there was points in that Denver series, you know, points against the Rockets where it's like, all right, AD, like, dominate these guys. And even tonight, I just felt like he didn't have that edge. Like, all right, Andre Iguodala, great defender, but he's past his prime. You see him in the post, you should dominate him.
And you have inches on him.
Yeah, you have inches. You have speed at this point. There's no reason you shouldn't either get a good look or get to the free throw line. And I feel like as a Laker fan, that was, you know, something that would annoy me. And then also just the overall energy from the start from the Lakers was just terrible. It looked like they treated this like a regular season game.
Yeah, you had that tweet. I was going to bring up that tweet at some point on this podcast, but yeah, you brought that up. they weren't as locked in. And then, not to look outside Anthony Davis, everyone was cold. Like KCP, Danny Green, those guys were terrible tonight. Didn't shoot well at all. It was a decent Kuzma game, but the Lakers as a whole, they just went ice cold. And even though I think they actually shot above 33% from three, maybe with 34%, they just weren't effective for majority of that first quarter. I mean, it was like 38-37 with like 3 minutes left in the first half.
Yeah, at 33% to finish the game, 14 of 42. You know what it was? Like, they got a lot of open looks, but it just didn't feel like as in a rhythm. It wasn't as much ball movement. It was kind of just like, oh, one guy makes a play or two people touches the ball in a possession. And you mentioned, Kuzma 4 of 8. Markieff Morris was huge. Like, if Markieff Morris doesn't have his best game of the season, this is not probably a blowout, but the Heat win in a pretty comfortable fashion, finishing 5 of 11.
Yeah, and it's bad when J.R. Smith got minutes tonight, right?
Yeah,
It was like, all right, I got to try something. Maybe J.R. Smith can find me something.
Yeah, I think like this is the type of game, and you didn't see it as much in game 1 and game 2 because there's such a huge talent gap between the Heat and the Lakers, but some of their roster construction shows, like not having those other creators or those other scorers to kind of complement AD and LeBron, and then also not having the elite three-point shooters. Like there's nobody on this team where you're like, wow, this is one of the top 10, 15 three-point shooters in the league. And that's really ideally what you want next to a guy like LeBron or Anthony Davis. And having to close with Rondo on the floor, which I thought this is probably one of his worser games that we've seen over the last couple weeks, it's easier for the Heat to come off and help when a guy like Rondo's out there. They're going to play the stats. They're not going to think that he's going to knock down all of his threes. And tonight, that helped take away Anthony Davis. That helped take away LeBron James.
I was waiting for you to bring up Rondo. He was Rondo from deep tonight. Obviously 0 of 3. Had a nice layup at one point. I mean, like
he tried to do it again though 2 more times. After he hit like the crazy horse shot, he went back to it, and it's like, yo, that is a shot that you don't consistently make.
Like you said, the issue for the Lakers tonight was the fact that Markieff Morris was their best bench player, and that's generally not a good thing because he doesn't play that many minutes to begin with.
And the fact that Anthony Davis couldn't be that defensive factor with the foul trouble, only playing 32 minutes, the Lakers just weren't able to have that same success because they were forced to go small. Like Markieff Morris was playing a lot of 5 tonight because Dwight hasn't really had a great impact in the series, and that takes away so much of what the Lakers are doing, and it takes away a lot of their advantage in size because Anthony Davis is that guy, and they're obviously missing Bam tonight. And you should be cooking them with Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard in there.
And you have to feel, and if you're Miami, you feel good now because you stole a game without having Bam or Gordon. And now if you get Bam back, Anthony Davis had a bad game without Bam. Bam comes back. Davis could once again start to have some challenges. And like you mentioned, Myles Leonard, I thought was solid in his brief minutes. I don't even think he missed a shot tonight. And then Kelly Olynyk, despite not being great defensively, he can score. And it's just funny how they've found offense despite missing 2 of their best, 2 of their 3 best players. Miami has still found offense. And Duncan Robinson, despite, like you said on one of your tweets, definitely doesn't look like he understands defense at times. But he was a plus tonight on the floor and was effective shooting wise. This was just a good game by Miami's role players.
They did a great job, and we saw them do this against Boston, is teams are going to try to eliminate Duncan Robinson from the game plan. They're not going to give him open threes. So we're going to put him on the side where you have to make a decision where are you going to give help against Jimmy Butler at the rim, or are you going to come off Duncan Robinson? And that's really what they forced the Lakers into a lot of situations like that. And that's kind of similar to the point with Kelly Olynyk. Like he's a guy that's pulling Anthony Davis to the 3-point line or whatever big you have on the floor. And now all of a sudden you're feeling more successful and there's just a lot of room to operate in the paint. And I think Miami's offense was just so much more crisp tonight. Like all the cuts, all the off-ball movements came with such a purpose. And then when you have the Lakers on the other side, not playing with the energy, not playing with the right mentality, specifically a guy like LeBron James, I'm going to call him out because I thought his off-ball defense tonight was bad. Like there was numerous plays where he got beat backdoor or he was like telling somebody else to switch and he didn't switch. Offensively, LeBron had some good moments in this game, but I felt like his effort would be better in Game 3 of the NBA Finals.
It definitely felt like at some point in this game, he realized that they probably weren't going to be able to win it. And he took some of the foot off the gas. Yeah. And it was somewhere in like the second quarter and even in the start of the third quarter where he's like, Davis is in foul trouble. This is probably going to be a lot of effort to win this game. We might as well just kind of like let them have it, especially when the guys are missing shots. And like, I'm not saying he actively does that, but like body language, like you said, like some of the reactions on defense, I haven't seen LeBron do that this entire playoff run. And then all of a sudden, Game 3 in the NBA Finals, we're seeing that type of behavior from LeBron.
And he was kind of complaining about some fouls, 8 turnovers tonight, 2 of them being travels and just some bad passes. Some of that was also the Lakers being out of sync. But obviously, if you get that type of performance from LeBron and Anthony Davis after we're used to seeing them average 30, it's going to be crucial.
And you know it's bad because that game, there's still like 0.7 seconds left, and he had already left the floor. And a couple guys had to, get back on the court, but he was already down the tunnel and leaving. Like, he was done. Like, obviously, he's obviously not happy with his performance. We know LeBron James is way better than 8 turnovers and, just looking not into it. But I expect a bounce back. I mean, this was a great game for Miami to win. But, like, there's a lot of stuff about this game in which you can't anticipate the Lakers doing it again in Game 4.
The Lakers did not play well. They did not do anything in terms of like, we should have won this game or they should feel any type of way. It's like they even still had a chance to win in a situation where they really didn't play well for 3 quarters and they kept themselves in it. But like you said, they're not going to commit 19 turnovers most likely in the next game. They're probably going to shoot better than 43% from the field. 33% from 3 is probably a number they might hover around depending if they get hot or cold. And some of it depends on Miami too, because I felt like their closeouts tonight were a lot better in terms of like, hey, we're going to give them to Markieff Morris, we're going to give it to Rajon Rondo, but we're not going to give it to some of the other guys and let them kind of get in rhythm. So credit to Miami. And this can kind of be a momentum swing for the series, like you mentioned, with Bam and possibly Dragic coming back for the next game. Do you think this is going to be able to turn this into a real series, or are things going to switch back to normal in Game 4?
I 100% believe it's dependent on Bam. If Goran's not there, it sucks. But Bam is the bigger piece because you're not going to be able to have an Anthony Davis performance like he did tonight in Game 4. He's not going to get in foul trouble. At least I don't think he's going to. Obviously, anything is possible, but you're going to expect the Anthony Davis from Games 1 and 2 if he's not in foul trouble here tonight. It didn't happen. So I'm anticipating that in Game 4. And you need Bam out there because, like we mentioned, Kelly Olynyk and Miles Leonard are not going to stop Anthony Davis on a normal night. So for me, it's just all about if Bam's going to play in this Game 4.
It'll be interesting, too, if Bam is back, if they still try to give Kelly Olynyk some minutes and play them either as his backup or, there would be times where maybe you could play them together, given Bam's versatility and just having some more size on the floor. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, 6 of 18. He could probably shoot a little bit better in the next game and looking for positives for Miami. But I'm not sure how much better they can be than tonight. There was a couple opportunities during some of those runs where maybe I felt like they could have knocked down a 3 or not committed a turnover. But it felt like tonight they did all the little things they needed to steal a game in this series, including taking what felt like a million charges.
No, 100%. The activity by Miami tonight, we mentioned it from the get-go. They just really saw blood in the water, and they attacked from point A to point B. Can this be duplicated? Because, again, it comes down to also, even though Jimmy Butler was great tonight, can he keep up this level of high offense efficiency? Like
70% from the field.
Right. That's without, shooting threes, but getting to the rim and then facilitating at such a high level. Can he do this for another game? Can he do this for another 2 games? Especially can he do it without Bam in a winning effort? Like that's another thing. Like tonight, like you mentioned, he did this fantastic performance shorthanded. More times than not, shorthanded still isn't going to be enough.
Yeah, this if he replicates this performance in an upcoming game, there's no guarantee the Heat are going to win.
Right.
There's so many other factors that went right, but this is part of the equation. This is one of the factors that you need to happen. And it doesn't necessarily have to be 40 points. It could be 30 on 50% shooting and 13 assists and 10 rebounds. But he also has to have that control of the game and just kind of provide that extra confidence and mentality. And the vibe that he had, you talked post-game, even pre-game with Rachel Nichols saying he was confident and going into it. It kind of was like, all right, whatever. NBA players are confident, but it's he really felt that way. So there's some intriguing factors in this, but given the talent gap, it's still very hard to see Miami turn this into a real series unless Bam comes back. And I feel like they almost need Dragic to an extent because they just need that little extra offensive boost that they just aren't going to find with the rest of the roster.
And keep in mind as well, Bam and Dragic could come back, and there could be, they could still not be worth anything.
They could be bad, yeah.
Right. Bam's shoulder, this is the second time he's re-aggravated in this playoff run already. So what's to say it's not going to happen again, especially when there's minutes out there when he's up against a Dwight Howard who's going to be playing extra physical because he knows Bam is banged up. Yeah. Those things you got to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think the one thing Miami really can take away this game is some of their defensive scheme in terms of attacking Anthony Davis. Like taking LeBron out of the game is almost impossible given he's, arguably the most complete player in NBA history, given his scoring ability and playmaking ability. But Anthony Davis is a guy that we talked about with the foul trouble, and then also he's a guy that just gets frustrated and he's willing to pass the ball up or settle for some of those mid-range shots. And he shot really well from mid-range in games 1, game 2, Denver series, and most of the postseason. But there's a chance he could have a couple bad shooting games combined with this Miami defense. So there's a little bit of hope for Miami, but it's still hard to see them jump that talent gap. What are you thinking going into game 4?
Game 4, I'm going to say the Lakers win.
Yeah.
I would love to see Jimmy Butler play with the same type of mindset, the same type of attack. But I just expect Anthony Davis to play way better in the first half. And if Anthony Davis plays better in the first half, this game doesn't get out of control. So I think it's all about Anthony Davis. So Lakers winning game 4 for me.
Yeah, I'm going game 4 for the Lakers as well. And I think just given Anthony Davis could honestly play this bad, but I don't think LeBron's going to play this bad. Not to say he had a terrible game, but there's plenty of room for improvement, especially for finals NBA LeBron. Like we're expecting a different level from him, and he just didn't have that tonight. He didn't have that extra juice, that extra gas. So it's like, all right, Anthony Davis could not show up. LeBron shows up and kind of helps his case for finals MVP.
So I'm laughing, and the reason I'm laughing is because I remember just looking at the conversations earlier today on Twitter. People were like, "Who would be Finals MVP for the Lakers after the first 2 games?" And I thought it was a good question. Now, like after 3 games, like it's a really good question because they both played bad in their own ways, right?
Yeah.
And it almost like it's just a funny aspect. I think I could still probably say LeBron, but the margins are already very close between the two, I think.
If you asked me before the game, I would have said Anthony Davis. Today, I would say LeBron. Just because his game wasn't as bad, where AD was like eliminated from having an impact, where LeBron wasn't great and he still had a ton of negative plays in this game, but you still felt him and there were still chances. And really, he was really good when he got downhill. And that's the Lakers made an attempt to attack a lot of those ball screens, but sometimes it's just kind of letting LeBron, I think, needs to attack ISOs once in a while. Just go at Jimmy Butler, go at Jay Crowder. Like they're not serious guys. Or sometimes he focuses too much on trying to find the mismatch instead of just running pick and roll with Anthony Davis. Like that's a duo that you can't really stop. And it's like Jay Crowder's on the other end. It's not like we're talking about Bam on the other end. So it's like, attack that situation. But like we said, feel pretty confident about the Lakers still in this situation, both expecting to win game 4. This is kind of just, making a gentleman's sweep. It's probably going to end in 5 instead of 4 at this point. But always a pleasure, Kory. Big thanks, everybody, for listening. You can catch us on all streaming platforms.
Peace out, Knuckleheads.